Hello everyone and welcome back to the Damage Report on a Tuesday, the day where you never know who you're gonna get unless you follow us on Twitter because we announce it on there. You know who we've got straight from the internet? Dan Evans is back. How's it going, Dan?
Great to be with you, John. I can tell you I'm not armed this time, so there's that.
Oh my God, I forgot about that. Okay, well he's the main reason we still do these remotely because I'm worried what'll happen if we're in the same
Wild Card Tuesdays.
Wild card, baby. So we had to have Dan here because I saw Elon Musk tweet something douchey and stupid, and I was like, well, gotta get Dan on to talk about this because I know that you're a connoisseur of Elon Musk. So I'm gonna make you defend your favorite person in the universe.
He also was talking trash about gaming chairs, and I just recently purchased one, so we're gonna have to go hand to hand on that potentially, politically speaking.
Oh, Dan, not only can I see the gaming chair that you're in. I don't know if you've looked. I have that tweet. Don't worry.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, I have it. Anyway, we're also gonna get. We need a London perspective on some of the recent sports news. So we're gonna get that from Dan as well. So that's gonna be fun. But as we go through this 90 minutes of news, we're gonna be covering so much. We've got some Democrats actually kind of fighting by fleeing, but that's all that we can get. So that's good. So we've got that. Will it inspire other Democrats? We'll find out together. We've got cops behaving badly. We've got Karens behaving badly, which is sort of their job, so we can't be that surprised. We've got almost too many revelations about Rudy Giuliani coming out these days. The Trump ones were fine. I talked about them in the pre-show, but some of the stuff that's coming out about Rudy Giuliani is just disgusting. So we're gonna be breaking that down, talking about racism in the European Championship. And then more besides, including hopefully if we can get to an update on the worldwide vaccination effort, because that's obviously very important. We're hoping we can cover that as well. But in advance of that, thank you everybody for being here, regardless of where you're watching. We appreciate you supporting the show. One way you can continue to do that is by hitting the like button or sharing the stream. That would be great. And as we go through this, feel free to send us messages and we will respond to your questions, comments, and concerns. And with that, Dan, are you ready to jump on that news treadmill?
Put that news treadmill on 10 miles an hour. Let's just go all gas.
10 miles an hour, a slight incline. Let's not go crazy. And we'll launch into this first story. Actually, let's get started with this video.
I am tired of sitting as a hostage in a Texas House of Representatives while Republicans strip away the rights of my constituents to vote.
That is Texas State Senator Senfronia Thompson, who not long after that got involved in a Democratic effort to try to block the anti-voting rights legislation that Texas Republicans have been desperately trying to pass by literally fleeing this state. So enough Democrats got on a plane. They boarded two private jets from Austin to DC just yesterday. They said they would not return until the 30-day special session had ended next month. And that is basically because of the constitution that Texas has. They need a certain quorum. So if they can get out of the state, which they successfully did, then they can at least temporarily stop the legislation from being passed. What does the legislation do? Well, among other things, it would outlaw 24-hour polling places, ban ballot drop boxes used to deposit mail ballots, and empower partisan poll watchers. All of these efforts, just a weird coincidence, make it harder for people to vote. It's weird. It's just that's the way sometimes policy ends. What are you gonna do? Dan, what do you think about this effort?
I am, as someone who has been calling for the Democrats to show backbone for a long period of time now, I'm really pleased to see this effort by the Democratic Party. As you'll get into later, there could be potentially some major repercussions for this. The governor of Texas is big mad about this entire effort right now, but this is a big thing. Like if the Democrats are gonna stand up for anything, it's going to have to be voting rights because the Republicans have done an institutional assault on our democracy, our country for years. And what I mean by that is they've gone to appoint presidents. Not appoint presidents, but they used the presidents that they've gotten elected to appoint judges, for example, in the courts, in the federal courts, doing weird things constitutionally with the Supreme Court especially, and claiming weird precedents with when you can have judges on the court and when you can't, to stack the courts in favor of Republicans. You've gotten state legislatures across the country that are gerrymandered. I have gerrymandered districts where Republicans are protected. There's a new census that was supposed to help with that, but the Republican president helped make sure there was an undercount. So now the Republicans have some weird advantages here and there. Like, they have institutional power, and the Democrats have been kind of keeling over the past decade or so, letting it happen. And this is now the last stand. This is gonna have to match up with efforts that are going on in Washington, D.C. with different voting rights bills that are floating around with varying levels of potentially passing. But this is an important step, and I'm glad the Democrats are taking it and playing hardball right now. It's gonna be a really tough fight, as we're gonna talk to him about in a moment. But like, this is what the Democrats need to be doing.
Yeah. Well, the only potential point of disagreement is it should match up with efforts that I really hope are ongoing in DC. I can't say that I've heard much about what's happening. A little bit came out about the reconciliation infrastructure bill today, which was not reassuring to me based on the content of what I saw there. But we'll see. Is for the People Act actually still being worked on? They imply that it's out there. We'll see though. But you are totally right about the fact that, like, if there's gonna be a fight, it has to be on this, because if you lose this fight, then you don't get to really have any of the other fights. They don't mean anything. And even this one, like, to give you an idea of how manipulated everything has been, and Dan alluded to some of the baked in nonsense that we have. So the thing about the anti-democratic nonsense in our system is that it all supports the others. So you have a federal system where you have small states getting disproportionately more power in a variety of different forms, including, by the way, in the Electoral College. So you can have a president who can't win the popular vote but gets elected via the Electoral College. He then gets to appoint judges who are gonna sit on the Supreme Court, so that in Texas, let's say that this eventually get passed, which it probably will. We'll spend the next couple of years with our fingers crossed, like, oh, what are the judges gonna say? And maybe a district court judge will strike it down, and we'll be like, yes, victory for democracy. And then the Court of Appeals will uphold the district court judge, and we're like, yes, this thing is going down. They're gonna stop the Republicans, and then the supermajority of the Supreme Court will say, yeah, the Republicans in Texas can do literally whatever they want. So, like, from the top to the bottom, it's all combining to make it so difficult to translate anything even approximating the popular will into actual policy. So somewhere the Democrats have to get involved. They have to try to do something. And right now, what they can do is run, even though, as Dan points out, that might have some consequences, including Governor Greg Abbott telling an Austin television station that he would keep calling special sessions of the legislature through next year if necessary, and raise the possibility of just arresting all the Democrats once they return home, saying as soon as they come back, they will be arrested. They will be cabined inside the Texas Capitol until they get their job done. So Dan, like, that's obviously a threat. Do you think that's what it will come to, a mass arrest of Democratic state lawmakers?
I mean, if the lawmakers go back into Texas, they're definitely facing that risk. Listen, the Republicans are on a very cornered, concerned plan that they've been on for 10, 20 years or so, actually more than that, to have total power over the government on all levels as much as they can, to deregulate it, drain it in a bathtub, everything they want to do, and they've been talking about doing for years. They're not going to let, maybe the optics of arresting politicians look bad because Trump taught them optics don't really matter as long as you're acting in a partisan will and favor. So yeah, I'm not the person playing the chess here. So like, maybe this is a thing where just the Texas lawmakers that are Democrats just don't live in Texas and they legislate remotely. A lot of us have been doing that for the past year anyways. So maybe it'll be an adjustment that'll be better for the Texas legislators' quality of life anyways, especially since political violence is on uptick again. But you want to, yes, of course, the Republicans are gonna play hardball because they've been playing hardball up to this point, and the Democrats are just learning hardball, and that's why I'm a little bit concerned about what their next move is, because traditionally they haven't been really smart and adept at playing the Republicans. Otherwise, we wouldn't have gotten to this point in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. And look, people are asking in the chat, they're like, wait, how is that legal? Apparently it is. Under Texas House rules, absent politicians can be arrested and returned to the House floor. It is Texas after all, people. You can pretty much do whatever you want. And the thing is, like, I don't want this to be the way that state parties have to act. I wouldn't want the Republicans doing this to stop actual popular legislation, but this isn't popular. This doesn't reflect the will nationally of the voters in Texas, and it's not based on anything. They're saying all of this is to stop voter fraud, but it's a complete farce. So what are they supposed to do? Just allow democracy, the final vestiges of democracy, the already our democracy is more manipulated and contorted than your average congressional district, but that's what we have right now. So what are you supposed to do? And so thankfully they're at least doing this. Although we should note that while I think they deserve some credit, obviously, like they're risking potential arrest and it's in Texas, so they'll probably be executed eventually. This is the area where Democrats will sometimes fight in trying to stop something. But I will point out to national Democrats, this is really a fight that you need to get involved in, because if they pass the For the People Act, then the Texas Democrats wouldn't have to be doing most of this, that this wouldn't be necessary. But it's always easier to get Democrats to show a little bit of backbone to stop something from being done than to get something new done, even if it's wildly popular, as the For the People Act with Republicans. It's difficult to get them to do that then, which is why we've just been dragging out month after month after month with the For the People Act without much progress. Any final thoughts, Dan?
Yeah, I was just gonna add context to that point you had about kind of Democrats' inability to play the politics of this right. Let's remember that these acts that are happening across the country to restrict voting rights are Republicans feeling like they're on the ropes, right? Because if the Democrats do well in Congress, which Republicans have already said we're gonna be obstructionists again, like in the Obama administration, then there's a significant chance that maybe Democrats can hold power for a little while longer and maybe build some momentum off of that in the coming midterm elections, general elections, all that stuff. But because Texas is on the precipice of becoming a purple state, being a purple state, maybe even being a blue state soon, along with other really big strongholds in the United States right now, could potentially in future elections, because of population changes, because of people thinking the Republican Party is just absolutely nuts. Things are not looking good electorally for the Republican Party, and so they're on the ropes and hit dogs holler, and they're fighting with everything they can right now. Democrats are acting like they're the ones on the ropes, and they're playing like that way, because in a way they are, but it goes back to your overall point, John, of they are not the best at strategy and utilizing the upper hand when they have it.
Yeah. And look at the difference in the willingness to play hardball. Like the Republicans will always act as if the Democrats are like a perfect melding of Mao and Stalin or something. Like Madison Cawthorn at CPAC is like, this is a tyranny of power-hungry madmen. Like, dude, they're not doing anything. Like they literally aren't doing anything. Whereas the Republicans are going to so much effort to try to make it impossible for Democrats to vote so they can stay in power, rather than literally propose anything popular. Like the thing is, the Republicans don't have to be much better than they are. There are a lot of crazy racist conservatives that are always gonna support them. All the Republicans really need is to win over a couple percentage points more of Americans by having some sort of actual platform. I'm not saying it has to be awesome. I'm not expecting them to pass universal health care or something, but literally any like shallow surface level effort would probably be enough for them to win in some of these states. And they don't want to do that. They would rather shred the last bits of democracy than try to put any substance to the fake claims of right-wing populism and all that. So that's the system. We got Democrats who can win, but don't really do anything with it, and Republicans who could if they wanted to, if they really cared to, but in the absence of that are going to try to effectively restrict the vote enough that they will remain in power. Anywho, we're going to take our first break. When we come back, you're all gonna need to hold on to your butts, because we've got a freak out in a Victoria's Secret that makes me uncomfortable in multiple different ways, and we're gonna break that down after this. Okay, everybody, before we went to that last break, I forgot to do something, which is let you know that we have another one of our classic Tuesday polls. So if you head over to tyt.com/polls, we want to ask you about the Dems Texas exodus. So at least 50 Texas House Democrats fled the state on Monday in an effort to deny the Republicans who control the state legislature the quorum necessary to pass a new law restricting voting rights. How do you rate their chances of killing this bill? So you can go to tyt.com/poll and answer the question, will Texas Dems succeed in their efforts to block the Republican voter suppression bill? Yes or no? We could have had a third option, which is, will it become moot because national Democrats will pass the For the People Act? But we know that would have gotten no votes, so what's the point in wasting your time? But anyway, go to that and we will give you the results later, tomorrow. We'll find out and we'll give them to you. Anyway, with that, you ready to do this, Dan? This is gonna be
ready as I'll ever be. Yeah, let's go.
Okay, well, let's take a look at this video.
Oh God, no, excuse, now you are, oh my God! Oh my God! Do you see this? Oh my God, I never thought nothing like this would happen to me. She just tried to run and hit me.
Okay, so what you're seeing there is a video in a Victoria's Secret in the Short Hills Mall in New Jersey. And what was thankfully caught on tape was that white woman rushing up to and attempting to strike a black woman, then immediately fleeing and breaking down in tears and denying that what had just been filmed had actually happened. There's a lot of video here. We're not gonna show it all to you, it is available online, but we wanna give you enough that you'll understand the context. So here's a bit more of the initial incident between the two women.
Run and hit me, and now she, did you see her? You saw her, right? They all saw her. Oh my God. Karen had a breakdown. She tried to hit me. Ask your workers. She tried to hit me.
I didn't try to hit you. Please don't record me. Don't record me.
Okay, so look, as hard as that might be to watch, as bad as that is, the section we're gonna play for you in a little bit is much worse. But Dan, I don't know if you were already familiar with this before this morning. What do you think about this incident?
Yeah, I'd seen this video a little bit beforehand, and like there's a cycle of these things. Like the Karen does the thing, someone records it, and then they get kind of blown up on the internet. People to varying degrees figure out like how to investigate that thing, investigate their personal life, and that's like it's not the best part about this, but also as someone who has been at the like receiving end of this sort of like entitlement culture that comes from white folks in America, unfortunately, some white folks in America, it's great, and I'm glad that people are able to say, have video, like have phones and video on them at all times, because if it's the crying white woman's word against like the calm black person or the black woman, usually that's going to win. But you have that first couple seconds where she's rushing against her, and then you have the next couple seconds where she throws her clothes to the cashier worker for whatever reason, and then breaks down and starts doing her like panic attack performance thing and makes it a big deal. Everyone else would have like reacted to that like performance and gone whatever with her side, because there's obviously distress there. But the video has all the evidence we need there, and like in history, there would have been a lot of lives saved potentially in the black community if there were this technology available 50, 100 years ago. But at least we have it today, so this sort of like Karen crap doesn't really fly.
Exactly, yeah. Assuming that when you put out the tape, people actually care. I mean, look at like all the body cam footage on cops. Like you can have clear evidence they just needlessly killed someone, and quite a few juries are like, no, I still like that and I want that to continue, unfortunately. I have something I want to add to this, but first, to really demonstrate the point that I'm about to make, let's get into a little bit more of the video when the incident escalates.
You keep lying saying I'm threatening you, so I'm recording to protect myself.
Can you please stop recording?
You cut. Look at this.
Get away from me!
Oh, y'all better get this lady.
away from me!
You gonna get security! Security! Look at this! Yes, can y'all get
her away from me! Get her away from me!
Lord have mercy!
Get her away from me!
Okay, so eventually security was called, and there's even more nonsense with that woman that happens with the security, and you can find out those details. So Dan, the thing about this for me is I get no pleasure from watching that. I guess I'm too much of a soft-hearted lefty or whatever, but like even a person who is clearly motivated by bad things and is trying to use the performative stress that they're experiencing, whatever, to predispose the workers there and security to take her side rather than black woman she was assaulting. I can't take people who are in some form of distress. And the added level to it is, it was so over the top that I can't help but believe that part of this has got to be some sort of mental difficulty, some sort of mental issues, a breakdown. That doesn't make the woman right. It doesn't mean that she wasn't initially trying to attack a black woman and believing that she would get away with it. That seems clear. But on top of that, and it's one of the reasons some of these stories I sort of shy away from, because like I wonder to what extent some of them involve people having mental health difficulties. This woman she was laying down on the ground, like shaking, like writhing. That's beyond what we generally see in these things. What do you think? Am I off base?
Yeah, I mean, like it's not for like people who still have a shred of humanity left, and like it's not a great video to watch, but like I at least like to use these moments to separate the broad community of folks, myself included, who deal with mental illnesses of some kind, and crazy ass public freakouts and behavior, and like the fact that you can have you can go with like mental health and like have these different struggles and be a responsible person in that and learn how to like best cope with that, to be kind to yourself, to be kind to other people, to just like maintain that and not have those freakouts. Or like, again, you kind of see, and there should be context before the video, of course, and maybe there's context afterwards, but mostly you see this woman coming to make threats against the person taking the footage, right? And so usually if you're having like a panic attack or you're like a mental health episode, you're not going to be running towards your trigger necessarily, you'll be running away from that.
That's true.
It seems like it could be a mental health episode type thing where she's made to be like angry and provoked or things like that. But let's not like, I don't think, of course, like we are not doing this, but for the audience out there, it's not to say, oh, you got to watch out for anyone who has like any sort of mental health issue because they could freak out like a Karen. That's stigmatizing. We don't want to do that.
Sure, yeah.
But we do want to say that like, yeah, what we're seeing here, this woman's clearly like not in her like right mind, her well position. And so like some of these internet brigading and going after her personally, I don't really love all that stuff. I'd rather she like, face consequences for what she did, but also have the ability to learn from this moment as a person so she doesn't do this to other people again.
Yeah, you're totally right. And yeah, I'm like, some people seem to think I'm defending her. I'm not. She's bad. I hate when people do stuff like this. I can't imagine, like the woman who filmed that, how many times has this happened to her and she hasn't been able to film it or hasn't thought to film it at the time? Like this is terrible that our country is filled up with incidents like this. I just don't. It's tough for me to watch. And it doesn't in any way like take away the culpability. And also, by the way, can be very helpful for security guards, cops, people who work at places like this. It's important for them to see these too, because that's the target for these sorts of manipulations, trying to turn those people in varying levels of authority against women like the one who's filming this. They need to know that this is going on. And I think to some extent, all of the anti-mask stuff might have put those people in a more defensive stance against people trying to manipulate them and get their way. But yeah, I just hate that there's so much of this. Like we've shown, Dan, we've had the woman in New York. I don't know if you've seen this, the woman who tried to get the person's dog hit by a car, and she's been popping up in other viral videos. Like there's so many people that this is their thing, is just going out there and starting stuff with people, and not just any people. Generally it's attacking black people, or more recently attacking Asian American people. And I just hate that we have a country that's filled up with this stuff.
Yeah, it's an entitlement culture. That's all I gotta say about that. It's entitlement.
Exactly. So anyway, we'll see what ends up coming out of this. Both of the women have been identified. I didn't feel like it was newsworthy to include that, but we will see what ends up happening. I am assuming that the footage will create a different outcome than you would have had if that woman hadn't thought to film this. Anyway, let's turn now to what happens when the cops do show up and don't make the situation any better. This, again, I just want to throw out before we go to this video, you're about to see a cop committing an act of violence against a woman. So just bear that in mind. If you don't want to see that, I totally understand it. You can fast forward in the video, but let's go to this. So what you had there was Officer Rory Spain punching Tyrania Edmonds in the neck. And as soon as he punched her in the neck, he was very worried that he was being filmed. Not worried that he had just knocked a woman to the ground by punching her throat, but he was worried that it was being filmed. And I really don't know why cops would be worried about being filmed, since they almost always get off. But he has at least entered into the first stage of, it's like the consequences equivalent of a football being put out to be snatched away as we go to kick it. He's been placed on administrative leave after the throat punch that you just witnessed. God only knows if it'll go any further than that. But Dan, as of right now, we've got the administrative leave part of this.
I mean, like you said, yeah, it's like you have stages. Like it could be someone's named stages of police lack of accountability here. Stage 1 usually involves administrative leave while an investigation goes on to figure out the facts of the case. But what it really is the cops investigating the cops. And so what you end up getting is a report that ends up going something along the lines of, this cop was doing everything they were doing in their manual and their training, and the person was resisting arrest and proposing all this like danger to the public or whatever. And so it's unfortunate, but he did what had to be done. And so nothing's gonna be done here. It's unfortunate that we've sort of internalized as a country that the way that police officers arrest people is usually like far too often involved with life-threatening violence. Throat punches can potentially be lethal if like done a certain way. So like, I again, and this is unfortunately not through any fault of your own, but just the fault of the country we live in. Not the first time I've been on the damage report where I've had to like point out and say that like the cop here is more focused about himself and his own feelings than the person whose life he just put in danger. Because like, last time I was on, there was that cop who did the pit maneuver and there was a rollover on the street. And his first thing was, oh God, looks like I gotta call this in and phone this in. Not, oh no, I wonder if this woman who ended up being pregnant is actually doing okay. So you see this from the cop in the video. You're going to see this institutionally from the cops, period. They only care about covering their ass.
Yeah, exactly. And so, there's details about the initial altercation, and they say that the woman had been arguing with employees and trying to hit them. And you can see in the video that she tries to bite the cop, which for some people who are, incredibly deferential to state power and love to see cops beating the hell out of citizens, well, that's all the excuse you need. She tried to bite him so he can do literally whatever he wants. And if he was predisposed to punch a woman in the throat, well, that's his excuse to do that. If he'd had a weapon on him, he could have used that. Like that for many Americans. Oh no, you didn't comply in exactly the ever shifting way that I believe you should. So then the cops are allowed to do whatever it is that they think they need to do and have secretly been wanting to do this entire time. And to that I say no. Maybe this is weird. I have different expectations for random people and for cops. We give them the ability to dole out lethal violence, and in return, I get to have the expectation that they will be a little bit more restrained in their use of violence and a little bit more proportional when they begin to dole it out. The woman tried to bite him. That to me does not immediately merit trying to destroy her throat with your fist. That big guy felt like he needed to punch her in the throat. And I don't know, maybe I'm just not as hot for authority as some people are, but that's not, I think, a reasonable conclusion to that interaction.
Like, I'm just sick personally, John, of feeling like I had more training and discipline on like how to restrain and take down people when I was like 12 learning martial arts than it appears that any cop in the United States has. About like, I feel like one of the things you're supposed to know is like, hey, sometimes in the field, you might have to arrest someone who does not want to be arrested. Here are some techniques you can use to like, like protect yourself, but also like maintain the situation. Also, it's usually not one cop there, it's usually like several. So there could be some backup here, but like I am tired of seeing these excuses from these cops and excuses from people who claim to be about making sure there's no tyrannical forces acting on behalf of the government, but also put like Blue Lives Matter stickers on their cars. Maybe they're hoping they're not getting pulled over or something, but it's not just like a hypocrisy. It's just a straight like ignorance at this point. It's a horrific injustice because it's resulting in people potentially losing their lives or having serious injuries done onto them. It should not stand.
Yeah, and by the way, it really gets to what you were alluding to, which is one of the overriding problems that's bigger than any individual story, which is the cops are doing this sort of thing because that's what they're trained to do. They're trained to always be terrified that they're about to be killed by whatever, by a car, by a weapon, whether it exists or not, by a woman who's already being restrained. That woman in that video, you don't know, she could have killed him with her bare hands at any seconds. That's how cops are actually trained to think. And if you're scared, and you will be thanks to our training, you should be ready to use lethal force. And so you get stories like this where they knock out a woman. You get stories like we've seen of young black girls in high school being body slammed on concrete because they weren't complying in the way that the cop wanted. The story that Dan was talking about, the woman didn't pull over in the exact way the cop wanted. She was pulling over, just not in the same way that he wanted. So he flipped her SUV over. This is a massive problem, okay? That's bigger than any one story. And it sucks that we got out a year of protests against the cops. And the only thing that seems to have come out of it is conservatives doubling down on their support for cops, unless the cops are trying to stop them from storming the Capitol, in which case you can kill them with Trump flags. But outside of that, they're even more deferential of state power. They're even more predisposed to want to lick the boot that's on their neck. Because you have stories like this coming out every day. We can't necessarily cover all of them, but these are pervasive. Any final thoughts?
No, just that, John, that these stories are pervasive. They happen every day at levels that we can't possibly cover, not just for our own mental sanity, but just because of like time. They're happening all the time. And so
exactly,
it's as a lot of stories end, the ball is in the court of the Democrats who we elected and fought for to get elected to actually make some changes here, or actually at least make some statements about this, and for people to pressure them to do so, because it can't just be on us. There's only so much that can be done against a super militarized police state like this.
Exactly. Okay, well, with that, we're gonna take our second break. But when we come back, man, Giuliani, what happens when you're powerful, influential, and nobody likes you? Well, books get written revealing all your secrets. So we're gonna be revealing a few of those after this. Okay, everybody, hold on to your butts. This is gonna be something. It's gonna get dirty, thanks to Rudy Giuliani, who's a filthy human being. Okay. Rudy Giuliani is the target of a number of different revelations coming out in some of these upcoming big political books. We'll turn now to Michael Wolff and his upcoming Landslide, The Final Days of the Trump Presidency. I read the name of the author because, as always, grain of salt there, evaluate these claims based on the sources that have been provided and who's coming up with it. But that said, there's a few different things about Giuliani that Michael Wolff is revealing, including this. Shortly after the November general election, Rudy Giuliani turned his focus to assembling a national legal team for then President Donald Trump's campaign, which obviously would drive quite a bit of news for several months as they traveled throughout the country, losing case after case after case after case, with the occasional break to fart COVID onto someone. But anyway, Giuliani, who was at that point Trump's personal lawyer, needed to bring together a national team in a day, with lawsuits set to go out after November 14th. There wasn't a lot of time between the election and when these court cases started. So initially, it got off to a rough start. with the former New York City mayor operating out of a conference room in the campaign's Virginia headquarters that was filled with trash. Michael Wolff says, quote, "The room had not been cleaned since election day, 11 days before. Refuse filled the trash cans and overflowed onto the floor. There was a heavy, sour or rotting smell, and the trash was a week-old buffalo chicken sandwich mixed with Giuliani's reliable farting." I actually hadn't read that part of the quote. Man, Michael Wolff is doing Rudy Giuliani dirty there. But look, I like the commitment to the bit. This is the least successful legal effort nationally in recent years. Why not start off in a disgusting, garbage-filled conference room, Dan?
Yeah, I very much come into this the same way you do, John, with like, okay, this is another Michael Wolff banger. I remember when Fire and Fury was treated by the political presses. Wow, I can't believe that these things we've basically been talking about Trump doing and being and acting as are actually written in this like scathing, hot book. And just like, okay, whatever, we'll be talking about admittedly more boring, but honestly more important things in the next 2 weeks anyways, as that moves on. But these give you really colorful details into things that we got little bits and glimpses of. You know, there's the whole the Four Seasons total landscaping thing that Giuliani's you end up getting, because it was very clear that the Trump campaign was a very slapdash operation at that point, as if it wasn't a slapdash operation in 2020 and 2016 beforehand that just won by a miracle there. But like it's with these Giuliani stories, you're kind of just getting a little bit more solidification of things you already know. And so I think it's important, John, to be like, you're not learning anything necessarily from Michael Wolff's book or these like specifically like particularly juicy sort of details. The big picture, the big thing you're learning, whether some of these details are like true or accurate or not, is that the idea of power and meritocracy that we have in this country, that is these are the best and the brightest, these are like clean, perfect people who know exactly what to do and are just thinking the boldest things. These are claims that they make themselves. No, these are just like a bunch of, honestly, a lot of bros who are just barely putting it together, flying by the seat of their pants, trying to make the big boss happy. And that's representative of a lot more of reality in this country in halls of power than a lot of the stories you get told in the world.
I think that is a great point. They did a worse job than normal hiding it day by day. I mean, that press conference, which you alluded to, is like the ultimate example of that. Their inability to put together like any legal argument that makes sense is another, despite having unlimited resources in terms of lawyers, in terms of money. They just couldn't do it. Look, the actual details about the garbage and stuff like that is disgusting. It's consistent with what we know about Giuliani. Like on a personal level, and again, maybe this is just me being soft-hearted or whatever, like it makes me really wonder why no one in his orbit, friends or family, is helping this guy out. I'm not talking about Trump, I'm talking about Rudy Giuliani. Like they describe him as being constantly drunk as he's doing this. Now, zooming out, like he's still my enemy because he's trying to take down democracy. But you would wonder, why isn't any one of the people, there's gotta be people who like him, why aren't they helping him? Like he's gallivanting around the country, drunk constantly, humiliating himself in pursuit of a wannabe tyrant's hold on power. Help him. Like I would help Dan if he started. When Dan starts doing that, I will help him because we're friends, okay? Anyway, it does get a little bit darker and substantive, if a little bit less, well, I don't wanna say sexy when it's about rotting chicken sandwiches and him farting all the time. But anyway, it gets more substantive.
Not to kink shame.
No, totally not. You know, if it's your thing, as it might have been for Ellis. Anyway, before the race was called in Michigan for Biden, we find out Rudy Giuliani wanted the former president to preemptively declare victory in the key swing state. It also apparently was true of Pennsylvania too. That was his advice. And so like through this, Giuliani had too much to drink, even in these meetings where he's trying to get Trump to declare victory. He's quoted as saying, "We've won, we need to declare victory. If we don't say we won, they will steal it from us. Look, we've won Michigan." You had, one of the aides pointedly saying that Trump had not won the state, that it hadn't been called yet. We have to say we won it, otherwise they will steal it. And one wonders if that is largely responsible for Trump taking that up as his thing. Trump is quoted as saying much the same. not here in the Michael Wolff book, but there's a Michael Bender book coming up, a Wall Street Journal journalist who says on the night of the election, this is how Trump was responding to it too, and partially because he has surrounded himself by lackeys who are repeating the same sorts of insane stuff. That said, Dan, I don't think you're gonna find much of that to be particularly surprising. How about a feud with Sidney Powell? Another big figure in the league.
I love me some feuds.
Okay, well, so as Sidney Powell, former assistant US attorney, became one of the faces of the legal team, tensions unfolded with Rudy Giuliani. During an outburst, Giuliani, who at that point again was personal lawyer, reportedly described Powell as crazy. After Giuliani questioned some of Powell's more bizarre election theories, she snapped back at the former New York City mayor saying, quote, "I didn't come here to kiss your effing ring." And this seems sort of consistent with some of the early reports we'd gotten of these like danger room style things where they'd bring in all, like Michael Flynn would be there and they'd bring in all these figures, and they were all sort of competing with each other to have influence over Donald Trump. They ostensibly all have the same goal, to keep him as president, but very different strategies. Sidney Powell was talking about releasing the Kraken and spreading more of the straight conspiracy theory stuff. Rudy Giuliani was focused more on the voter fraud, but this is all grift at the end of the day. So despite the fact that they should be natural allies, they have the same goal, they're working for the same man, it really is about them. And so it seems natural that at some point it would, come to metaphoric blows.
Yeah, that's one aspect of a lot of what you're getting here at, is that the reason why no one's coming to protect Giuliani or save him is because he is surrounded by people, probably even in his family too, because I think his like son's running for office or something now, trying to off of those coattails. But like, you're surrounded by people who by their nature are self-dealing. They're around an environment where you have to be looking out for yourself at all times. And there's very little room for collaboration if you aren't planning like 3 steps ahead to backstab them. So of course no one's gonna help Rudy Giuliani, but like I'm kind of like laughing in the background here because I like to imagine like how Rudy Giuliani, how he went from being called America's mayor to now like having the demeanor of one of your like drunken uncles or someone older in your family at a Domino's game where they've had like 6 too many Modelo's to drink and they're just like completely bloviating. But this is like political strategy here. This is the same demeanor of like your drunken uncle playing dominoes at a family get together, but like this is like actual political strategy happening here. It's been an interesting fall to watch Rudy Giuliani kind of like go from this America's mayor, which was already like, marketing from the Republican Party thing, to now this sort of, I guess, representation of the Trump administration of being like sort of a shell of his former self, but also just like representing geriocracy and just general mental decay.
Yeah. And like we pointed out, I think it was last week, in the end, like Trump won't even pay him for the legal services. Like he set up that disgusting garbage legal defense room and they won't pay him for it. And so he started crowdfunding and he got 100 donors. He wanted $5 million. And 100 people were like, I guess I'll help you a little bit. You were loyal for a bit. And that's it. What a sad end to America's mayor. Anyway, let's mix things up with the little bit of time that we have remaining and jump into what everybody tuned in for, sports news on the Damage Report. Let's do this. Some of the recent developments in the European Championship have resulted in an incredible outpouring of racist sentiment against players. Not new in the world of football. Racism is sort of a baked in part of it, but it's gotten particularly disgusting recently. There was this study that found an outpouring of directed racial abuse on Twitter at a particular group of players. You've got Marcus Rashford, Jadon Sancho, and Bukayo Saka, the targets of abuse after they missed spot kicks in a penalty shootout with Italy. And so they did their best as athletes and came up short, so why wouldn't that result in multiple nations showering them with racism afterward? Let's see, you had a mural in the city of Manchester depicting Rashford celebrating his charitable work, defaced in a way police have called racially aggravated. And so look, we've got more details that we're gonna get to, including responses, but while I haven't been following the European Championship, I'm not that into sports, Dan, the fact that it delved so naturally seemed to sort of escalate into race-based attacks against these players seems consistent with the anecdotal sports following that I've done over the years.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of worldwide soccer, even though I think one of the beautiful things about football is it's called worldwide, but American show, so I'll say soccer now. Is that it's such an international sport. You see it played in some of the poorest areas of the world by kids who are just this is the thing they've got to do, and it's kind of charming and uniting in that way on all different continents, and all those same continents where there's professional or semi-professional leagues where you have cameras there and fans in the stands. You also get a lot of racism, and it's been covered not a lot in major sports media or in a lot of weird ways. I'll give a shout out to my friends Caesar and Bamit. We made a podcast who are also on Power Report with me sometimes, who do cover this. In addition to covering world soccer, they're talking about how in a lot of these cases you'll go to matches in Italy or in South America or wherever, where you have, because of racial tensions that are happening in that country that are deeply related to the politics of that country. And generally these things do fall on fair skin versus darker skin lines and boundaries here. You get instances of racism from players and from the stands. And I will say one thing, John, because you started the show by saying a London perspective, but I'm a proud Manc from Manchester. And so I know we can definitely in Manchester, it's generally seen as a largely, metropolitan city, largely liberal. But that doesn't mean you don't have in these places, there are people who have been fed the Brexit sort of nationalist nonsense that's been going on there, and so they're going to be doing these different racially aggravated attacks. But overall, you also see, not to go on into this, but there's I think a study or something that domestic violence goes up whenever there are cases when England loses soccer matches. So this is a larger issue with that island kind of being sore losers with things ever since they lost their little empire. And so it's a larger issue with the people in the country and the way they handle sports and internalize their feelings onto sports, when these are just people, right? These are people who are doing their damnedest and doing their best, and actually did a pretty good showing, because they made it to the semifinal, nearly won for the first time in decades. So at least is that.
Yeah. Well, let's briefly point out too that some of the people who seemingly are doing kind of the right thing now, speaking out against the racism, like Boris Johnson tweeting this England team deserve to be lauded as heroes, not racially abused on social media. Those responsible for this appalling abuse should be ashamed of themselves. Well, look, free of context, yes, you are right, Boris Johnson, but you're also part of a movement that has been attacking these players in other ways, and not just Boris Johnson. So you have before and during this tournament, the England players have been kneeling before the matches, similar to some of the protests that we've had here in the US. That has angered members of the England fan base, because obviously, the same exact reason in America, some people are awful. So you had Boris Johnson, as well as people like the Home Secretary Priti Patel, specifically asking to condemn the England fans who booed, but condemning the players for their protests before. Patel had said, I just don't support people participating in that type of gesture politics to a certain extent as well. So, as was pointed out on Twitter, you don't get to stoke the fire at the beginning of the tournament by labeling our anti-racism message as gesture politics and then pretend to be disgusted when the very thing we're campaigning against happens. With that context, yeah, I guess saying people shouldn't tweet the racist stuff is good. But what is your actual commitment to this? What is the substance of your support for these players? Does it only go as far as don't tweet at them? When you're attacking their completely justified protests, you are laying the groundwork for this sort of race-based abuse to come later on. Dan, any quick final thoughts? We're almost out of time.
Yeah, just that I think it's kind of amazing how the same rhetoric about kneeling before sporting events that didn't really make a difference that much in America, or didn't make so much of a difference in England or Canada, are now spreading to all these other countries. They're getting mad about the same things because their right wing are using the same sort of culture war nonsense to stoke fear in their base politically.
Yeah, exactly. A completely quiet, silent, peaceful protest, too much for some people. Anyway, thank you to our linear audience for joining us here. We've got more coming for YouTube and Twitch, so stick around after this.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Derola. I'll see you soon.